everybody. Welcome to Strumming with Christopher. I'm Christopher Gallegos with Monterey County Free Libraries Gonzales Branch. So, the first 18 episodes of Strumming with Christopher have been technique episodes. And now that we have some techniques under our belt, we've been talking about styles of music. That way you can say, oh, some of these things I've learned fit into this type of music or that type of music. And it'll help you decide what kind of things you want to play. And also maybe just make you curious about music or music history. So I've talked about blues, I've talked about country, and I've talked about folk music. Now those three styles of music all seem to feature the guitar as a main instrument. Now jazz is a little different. Jazz has guitar players, and some really good ones. Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass come to mind. But jazz has a different approach than these other types of music. And that's interesting because jazz essentially kind of runs on a parallel track with blues. Blues was a rural southern music, and jazz was kind of an urban, club music. Not that kind of club music, but yeah, jazz was something that took blues structures, so like those 7th chords, the 1-4-5 thing that you have in the 12-bar blues. That typical 12-bar blues, a lot of jazz started from those types of song structures. Very simple, but what ended up happening is you had these songs that were popular in jazz, kind of like you have the pop song that you can't stop humming when you're driving to work or something. There's songs like that in jazz too, and they're called standards. And a lot of times there was not a vocalist, sometimes there was, a lot of times it was instrumental. But what you started having happening in the 1930s, 40s, and blues was still happening too, right? But you had music in cities in the north, particularly New York, Chicago, and you had musicians that were playing these standard songs of the time, and somebody started getting this idea, hey, Mr. Piano Man, why don't you make up something for about 2 minutes, and then the sax player will do something, and then the bass player will do something, and then the drummer will do something. And it ended up being this kind of music that starts with a structure, but then it has a lot of improvisation, which is a fancy word for just making up melodies on the spot. Usually melodies, right? And improvising takes a lot of skill on your instrument. You have to know where all the notes are. You have to know a lot of different scales and other techniques. So our discussion about jazz is not really going to be how to improvise, although maybe one day. But I do want to talk to you about rhythm guitar, because rhythm guitar is always really important. So if you're playing guitar in a jazz environment, or you just want to have a jazzy sound, you have to know some chords that are a little bit more sophisticated than just the typical, or. So bar chords and first position chords are fine for most things, but jazz is a little bit more sophisticated. There's more notes involved. The best way to say it is there's more colors involved. If you want to think of sound as like an artist in painting, so far we have like the Crayola 4 marker set or something, and with jazz there's maybe a 16 marker set. There's just more color to it. I mean, you start having chords pop up in jazz that are really weird, extended chords, things like or just all kinds of chords that are just with a lot of notes and weird fingerings. So we don't want to go there yet, but what we want to do is we want to take a feel that you're familiar with, which is the bar chords that move around anywhere and have a root on the low E string and have a root on the D string. Okay, so that's always your low bass note, what they call the root note. And these bar chords I want to show you today, they're not bar chords. These chords I want to show you today, they behave like bar chords in the sense that they can move anywhere. And once you get a little bit more sophisticated in jazz, there's all these shapes you can memorize that are just wild. But it's good to start with something that you can move around that adds a little bit more sophistication, right? So I'm talking about major 7th bar chord. I did it again. Major 7th chords, right? And the major 7th chord has that behavior where you can just move it around. So it feels like a bar chord. It's just not as much strain on your finger trying to hold that bar that's so hard for so many of us. So a major 7th chord I'm going to show you these two shapes that you can move around. So remember the major bar chord, that shape we've learned, and then there's that D shape. But major 7th chords sound a lot nicer, so check out this contrast. Major, A major, A major 7th, D major, D major 7th. And that shape can just move everywhere. Okay, so let's get into this shape. So as usual, I like to use A as an example just because it's in the middle, based on fret 5 here. And you're not stuck to that, just for example, you know. So instead of a bar here, you're going to start with your index finger, low E string, 5th fret, press it down, and there's a little bit of a difference here. You're going to have your finger kind of resting on the A string below it, kind of diagonally. And what it is you're trying to mute that A string, okay? You don't want it to sound. You want to mute it. In this type of low E root A major 7th, you want to mute that. It's not part of it. It's really only 4 notes that you're playing, okay? So then after that, you're going to have your ring finger on the 6th fret, D string, pinky right under that, 6th fret, G string, and then you're going to have your middle finger on the B string, also on the 5th fret. Kind of hard to see there, but so really 2 fingers on the 5th fret, 2 fingers on the 6th fret for this example. And then you're not going to play this muted string, and you're not going to play the high E either. So it's really just these 4 notes, this little cluster, and you can move it anywhere, just like you can with a major bar chord shape. It's just a really cool, sophisticated beginner jazz chord. Okay, so what about that D shape we're familiar with, which is kind of like these 2 fingers here. Remember D because it's fret 5 on the A string for this example. Standard but boring. Okay, so then this major 7th shape down here, it's also kind of like a little cluster thing here. Index finger on the A string, 5th fret, and this one has more of a stretch there. Your ring finger, jump on over to the D string, 7th fret. Middle finger, 6th fret on the G string, and then pinky, 7th fret, B string. Okay. So you have that nice major 7th shape again. And remember, the whole point of knowing a chord shape on the low E and then on the D as the root notes is because if you're only using one chord shape, you're eventually going to run out of, it's going to become really hard to play a chord progression. Like, say you want to play an A and a D just using this shape, it would look like this. It's doable, but there's a big slide, and when you can just do this. Right underneath, learn the chord so you can move right underneath. Okay, anyway, so yeah, those 2 shapes, just check them out, play around with them, and just think with that bar chord mentality where, hey, I can move this around as long as I keep this shape going. And also, yeah, make it a point to practice on different frets that low E bass shape, and then try to transition to the one underneath. That way you can know what both shapes feel like, and once you have a grasp of it, you can really get a lot of mileage out of that major 7th chord to sound really cool and make up some stuff. Yeah, so try that. Beginner jazz, rhythm, sound, and approach. As always, great to talk to you all, and keep strumming.